Today we're going to begin learning how to apply trim on the AH-64D Apache. In all the videos I've seen so far that cover the topic of trimming the Apache, I've noticed heavy reliance on the control indicator, which you can access by pressing right control enter. And while the control indicator is sort of a good tool to begin studying how trim on a chopper works, I wouldn't recommend that anyone become dependent on it. I mean, actual helicopter pilots don't use a control indicator while they're trimming their chopper, so I'm going to start off by recommending that you don't turn on the control indicator anymore. The next step is to go into DCS and open up the options, go to Special among the top tabs, and choose the AH-64D among the options on the left. On the main page for the AH-64D's options, second from the top you'll see the cyclic trimmer mode, and third from the top you'll see the pedal trimmer mode. For each of these you have three options: the instant trim, which is force feedback friendly, the central position trimmer mode, and the joystick without springs and force feedback option. Make sure you have the instant trim force feedback friendly option selected for both your cyclic and your pedals. Now, in some ways, trim in a chopper is similar to trim in an airplane. For example, if your plane becomes imbalanced because you've dropped a bomb off the left wing, the right wing carrying more weight is going to want to pull the plane down, which will steer the plane to the right. A pilot could hold the stick perpetually to the left to compensate, or the pilot could adjust the trim to left wing down so that he's not having to work so hard. Now, a chopper gains its propulsion by leaning one way or another, so a chopper pilot, if he wanted to make the chopper go fast, would have to perpetually push on the cyclic. Or when the chopper pilot has the helicopter flying the speed and the way that he wants, he can just press trim, and that'll center the inputs on that relative position, easing the workload on the pilot. Now, real chopper pilots don't need a control indicator to adjust their trim. They learn to feel the need of the aircraft, and that's what we're going to work on doing here. We've taken off from the Mariana Islands and we're flying out to sea, and soon we'll turn around and fly a bit over the island, adjusting our trim along the way as necessary. Now, I've already made a couple adjustments to the trim. This gives us a pretty steady cruising speed at about 99 miles per hour, with a pretty good balance and lift that I can adjust just by nosing down or up a little bit, much as you would do with an airplane. And unless you were really paying attention, you probably did not even notice when I adjusted the trim. Trim adjusts differently in a helicopter, but it's not impossible to manage. You just have to get a feel for it. Now, in the instant trim mode, what you need to do is get your helicopter into the attitude that you want. This involves manipulating your cyclic, which is a helicopter's joystick, your anti-torque pedals, which are your rudder pedals, and your collective, which is a lot like your throttle, until you have the chopper flying in a way that you want to maintain for a while. Then you're going to press the up trim hold mode just for a moment, and what'll happen is that will become the new relative center for your cyclic and your anti-torque pedals. Unfortunately, this is where things go wrong for many people, because as soon as you depress the up trim hold mode button, the chopper will add whatever position you happen to be holding your cyclic and your anti-torque pedals to its new relative center, and this can cause the Apache to feel like it's suddenly pitching forward or torquing over to one side or another. For persons who are used to flying airplanes, this can really be disconcerting because it's not at all like how the trim works on an airplane. When you change an airplane's trim, whatever the current position of your joystick or pedals do not get added to that trim. But it is the case with choppers, so it's something we have to get used to. Fortunately, it only takes a little practice to get used to it. To make it work, as soon as you depress the up trim hold mode button, smoothly but quickly let up on the anti-torque pedals and the cyclic. Don't just let them go, that'll throw the chopper around too, but smoothly let up on them, guiding them gracefully to a return to center. This only takes a moment, and from that point forward, you can begin controlling the chopper with your controls operating from the new relative center. It might sound complicated, but it isn't. I'm going to jump maps because the Mariana map is kind of glitchy right now. The frame rates are rather slow. So we're going to jump over to the Nevada map, do a hot start from a little airfield out in the desert, and we're going to accomplish several trims to slow her down and bring her in for, well, I won't call it a picture-perfect landing. I'm not that good with the Apache yet. We'll just call it a functional landing. Right now, we're just focusing on getting our trim right. And take note that at no time during this flight, nor during the flight I'm about to show you, have I used the control indicator. I'm not even going to put it on. You really don't need it at all. All you need to do is get used to flying your chopper till you have it flying at the attitude that you want, and then, and only then, depress the up trim hold mode button. And before we jump maps, an additional word of advice. Do not put your trim buttons on the joystick. I did this at first because, well, usually I fly airplanes and it's very intuitive for me to have the trim controls on the grip. In a chopper, really, you should have your trim buttons on the throttle. Right now we're only dealing with the up trim hold mode button, and I'm flying with a Thrustmaster Warthog throttle, and I keep the trim buttons on the 4-way hat just to the right of the mini stick. I really didn't want to make this change, I'll confess, because I like to keep my controls pretty consistent from aircraft to aircraft since I fly several in DCS and also in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. And whenever you shift controls around for one aircraft or another, well, it's a new set of controls you have to learn. But in the case of flying a chopper, it really is the better thing to do. Put the trim buttons on the throttle. The reason being is that trim requires so much finesse in a chopper, and even the very slight movement of your thumb to depress a trim hat on the joystick will throw things off if you're flying a chopper. I know, it doesn't really make any difference if you're flying an aircraft, but with a chopper it's important. So let's jump over to the Nevada map. So I'm going to take off and maintain a hover to get a bit of altitude. And once I'm up a bit over 100 feet, we'll pitch forward and trade a little altitude for speed, but we'll regain that altitude in a moment. Now, I don't recommend that you take off this way, and I'm sure it's not by the books, but we're going to be making a pretty short trip. We're just going to get up, get some speed, and run out to that little hill directly in front of us at about 80 degrees, or right off our 12 o'clock, and then we're going to do a U-turn and head back to this airfield. And I want to get up and be up to speed pretty much by the time I reach the end of this runway, so that I can immediately start demonstrating how it is we're going to get good trim in this flight without ever referencing the control indicator. Essentially, what I'm doing is using the cyclic to get the helicopter into the attitude that I want, and the anti-torque pedals to ensure the fuselage is lined up, pretty much. And once I have that attitude and I reach speed, then I'm going to hit the up trim hold mode button. Watch and see if you can spot when it happens. I'm going to make it extra easy for you, it won't be subtle. And one extra note while I'm making the adjustment, never depress the up trim hold mode button while using the collective to climb or descend, because that's when you have to apply additional anti-torque, and since the anti-torque pedals also get trimmed, you'll end up setting your rudder pedals at a position you don't want. Right there, did you see it? The chopper dipped a little to the left and downward, because I hit the up trim hold mode button and was a little slow on recentering the cyclic and the anti-torque pedals as I depressed the button. Also note that I didn't do a whole bunch of little trims. I got the chopper into the attitude and the speed that I wanted, and then and only then did I adjust trim. You can do trim a little bit at a time, especially if you're making frequent adjustments. But I find that once you get used to the way the chopper trims, it's easy enough to make a large trim adjustment all at once. Watch for it again carefully here. I'm going to make a very minor trim adjustment on the anti-torque pedals. It was a very tiny adjustment, almost unnoticeable, just getting the fuselage to line up a bit better with our heading. And here's an observation on why I prefer the instant trim force feedback setting among the 3 possible trim settings. In this setting, your trim is accepted the moment you depress the hold trim mode button, and you get immediate movement feedback which tells you if you have the chopper trimmed like you wanted it. Alright, let's bring her to port. We're going to come around about 180 degrees and head back to that airfield. Really working smoothly with the trim just takes practice. And it doesn't even honestly take all that long. I haven't even put 10 hours into the Apache module yet. You just have to get into the rhythm of it, kind of like playing a musical instrument. Beat 1, set your attitude. Beat 2, depress the up trim mode. Beat 3, smoothly, quickly and gracefully recenter your anti-torque pedals and cyclic. Oh yeah, baby, that's jazz. Just get into the rhythm of it. Beat 1, beat 2, beat 3. Attitude, depress trim, recenter controls. So the airfield is not all that far away, and at this point we have to start considering bleeding a little altitude, and soon we're going to have to start looking at slowing down. And just as we adjusted trim to make our travel easier, we're going to also adjust trim to make it easier to maintain a slow speed with adequate anti-torque force from the tail rotor. To slow down, we have to pitch up a bit while at the same time decreasing lift by lowering the collective, which will cause us to bleed both speed and altitude. So right here, I've done another adjustment trim after holding the nose pitched up for a bit to help slow us down. And we'll do 1 or 2 more adjustments so that we can obtain a smooth, graceful landing.
Rotor RPM low.
As you can see, that's the intent anyway. Doesn't always work out perfectly. Practice makes perfect. And I have a lot of perfection yet to work on. So I've come down a little bit too early. I'm still thinking like an airplane driver, not a chopper driver. But that's okay, we haven't touched down yet. Plenty of time to move forward and see if I can set us down neatly on the white stripes just ahead. Now while I'm doing that, I'll point out that the main thing to take note of on the flight back is those places where I trimmed. If you didn't notice, I marked every place where I trimmed with text at the top center of the screen. Each one of those successful trims were accomplished by pulling up the aircraft till I got the speed that I wanted with no rotation, and leveling up the collective so that I had 0 ascent or descent, and only then depressing the up trim mode button. And I was being less dramatic about those trims than I was earlier on in the flight to show you just how smoothly that trimming can be accomplished. And I've said it before, I'm not ashamed to admit it, I'm not a chopper pilot. I'm brand new on this module. I think I might have a grand total of 10 hours on it. So I'm pretty sure if I can fly this baby, land this baby, hover this baby, and trim it correctly, then anybody can. Just stick with it, burn the midnight oil, you probably only have to take it to 9 p.m. And that way you can still get to bed at 10 with your wife and keep her happy. And it'll all come together. Well, thanks for joining me in this lesson. I really do think you'll be better off learning not to use the control indicator. I've never used it with any of the aircraft. I prefer to just get a feel of the aircraft rather than having to be glancing at that all the time. It's, too much information is a problem pilots constantly face, and to me it's one more thing providing you extra information that, well, it just might be TMI at some time. And apart from that, I think you're honestly just going to fly all the better if you learn to just get a feel for how the chopper is supposed to behave when you're at the stick. Thank you for joining me on Cerulean Skies, and as always, if you like what you see, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps.